Hey guys, so today we'll be taking a look at Mesoamerica. This is a list of terms and vocabulary that you will hear me reference and that you will or have seen in the text that you read for homework. And this is a map of modern day Mesoamerica. Now, to tell you a little bit about Mesoamerica, before roughly 3500 BCE, Mesoamericans. Mm, 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 mm. Hey guys, so today we'll be talking about Mesoamerica. This is a list of vocab and terms that you'll have seen either in your readings or you'll hear me talk about today. And this is a map of modern day Mesoamerica. Before roughly 3500 BCE, Mesoamerica was uninhabited. It is said that because of the Ice Age, pathways of newly uncovered land allowed people to travel and create a new life in a new place, which they called Mesoamerica. Because of the climate and the natural environment, people of Mesoamerica had a totally different palate and food type than those in Mesopotamia. So, for example, in the Fertile Crescent, grains, goats, and sheep were abundant, and in the highlands of Mexico, corn, beans, and peppers, tomatoes, and squash became the staple foods of Mesoamericans and are still staple foods in South America today. So, as I said, this is a modern day map of Mesoamerica. And you can see that the regions of Mesoamerica make up Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Costa Rica. The main regions that we will be looking at are Teotihuacan near Mexico City and La Venta along the Gulf of Mexico. The cultures that we will be looking at are the Maya, Aztec, and Olmecs. This is a map of Mesoamerica and what it looked like before. And you can see here is the Gulf of Mexico, which is La Venta, where the Olmecs lived, and here is Mesoamerica, and here is Mexico City. And you can also see here like the different regions of the people that live there as well. This is a look at when Mesoamerica actually was. And it's a little bit confusing when talking about Mesoamerica because so far there's been three different ways that we have heard Mesoamerica, that time period, referenced as. So we have classic, we have pre-Columbian, and we have formative. Now, I feel like when we hear the words classic, we relate it to Greek culture. And when we hear pre Columbian, we might think before Columbia existed, but that is not true. Pre Columbian is just referencing before Columbus came to the Americas. Now, the way that I will mostly be referencing the time periods are in terms of early formative, middle formative, and late formative. Now, the first civilization we'll be taking a look at are the Olmecs. So, the Olmecs existed pretty much between 1600 BCE and 350 BCE, and they are known as the first great civilization. Now, a lot of the words and terms that I will be using today are not derived actually from Olmec culture, but from the Aztecs. And the word Olmec translates into rubber people. And why this is because the Olmec made and traded rubber throughout Mesoamerica, and they were able to make sandals and rubber bands, and most importantly, the balls that they play with the cosmic ball game, which is what we'll be talking about later on in the class. The Olmecs also developed more formal agriculture and constant complex trading systems. And we'll see that in a lot of the materials that were used to create their massive structures and beautiful items and material goods. In this image, you can see how complex the trading systems were in Mesoamerica for the Olmecs. As you can see, the Olmecs lived here, and the main city that they created and lived in was La Venta. And you can see that they traded all the way down here to El Salvador, and that their main source of jade came from all the way up here. And so it took a lot of effort to create things out of jade and out of the things that came from El Salvador. This is an aerial view of La Venta, and I just want you to take note of how this looks like, that it's sort of like split up, almost very similar to what the Aztec sunstones look like. We'll mention the Aztec sunstones again later in this class, but they are beyond actually our class periods, and so we won't focus too much on them. But I just want you to just remember the way that this is laid out and looks like, and pay attention to the way that they sort of play with the landscape around them to sort of accentuate the features of the city and to draw people in to the main parts of the city. So the first object that we'll be taking a look at are the colossal heads. Those were found in San Lorenzo and in La Venta. 17 of them were found in San Lorenzo, which is said to be one of the earliest Olmec settlements, which predates before 900 BCE. And a lot of the heads that were found in San Lorenzo, especially, were said to be intentionally damaged. Not just damaged by nature, but damaged with intentional force. And if you think about like the defacing of the head of the Akkadian ruler, you could say that this is a very similar representation of sort of like the destruction and defacing the value of these figures. Now, 4 heads were found at La Venta, which were not damaged, which would be interesting to find out more on maybe why those were damaged or why the other ones were. Now, the Olmec brought these boulders from the Sierra de los Tuxtalos mountains of Veracruz. Given the slabs took a lot of effort and resources to bring there, it is assumed that they were most likely representing important figures like rulers or gods. And they were created from basalt. And all of the figures from this period that we will be taking a look at are shown very similarly. They all have sort of these chubby little baby faces, and they have these downturned mouths, these wide nose, and these beautiful almond eyes. These are other images, and as I said that there were several of them found, and they all look very similar, but they are all different because they each have a different headdress that they are wearing, which probably represents a different god or ruler. The next objects that we'll be looking at are the La Venta findings, and this set of figures are called offering number 4, and we do not know exactly what this offering is depicting, but experts say that this is a representation of some mythological or historical event. And this came from the middle formative period, which is roughly 1500 to 600 BCE. And another key thing to note is that, like, us humans, us modern day humans, we did not reconstruct this. We found this as is in the way that it was created and assembled. To give you some perspective on the size of these figures, the figures are up to 7 inches tall, and the celts, which you see behind here, these are up to 10 inches tall. And the celts were found with beautiful engraved marks, um, and they were made out of jade. So this tells us that this was a very important event that it was being depicted, because jade is also known as like the primary godly stone of Olmec society and Mesoamerican culture. And on the backside of these celts in the background here, these guys back here, there were a lot of different images and shapes. There were images of supernatural forces in Olmec society. And there were a couple that were unfinished with just some geometric shapes on them. And the last two celts, I want to say, were these two. They were shown together with what is referred to as the flying Olmec. And these two celts in particular show that they were a part of a larger piece that the Olmecs upcycled from another larger structure. These are other images of offering number 4 in La Venta. And as you can see in the second image, you can see the way that they were laid out and sort of how you could see how this is a ritual. And one thing that I would like to note is from this perspective, you cannot tell that the female figure marked as female figure is a female figure. But how they can tell it is because there were some accentuating mark of what could be breast and a vagina on this figure. And in this first image here, you can see the replication of those downturned baby pouty full faces that we will continue to see throughout representations in Mesoamerican and in Olmec culture. The next thing that we're going to talk about here is the cosmic ball game. Now, when learning about the cosmic ball game, it's kind of loaded and a little bit confusing, because this game was both played as, just a casual fun sport and as a ritual practice. As you can see here, it's sort of played, I want to say it's a combination between lacrosse and soccer, where, as I told you earlier, they created these heavy rubber balls that they used to play. And the heavier the balls, the more intense and padded their gear was that they used to protect their bodies. So this game had many different meanings. Some were in practice and ritual and honoring of cosmological ideals, and also oftentimes war captives were playing members of the winning city. To prepare for the game, it was very, very ritualistic. So it consisted of avoiding certain foods, getting little sleep, and abstaining from sexual contact in order to stay focused and play this game to win. And generally, it was a male sport, a male game, and a male ritual. Probably for several reasons, but also that a lot of these games ended up in sacrifice with a lot of blood and gore and violence, and that was just not a woman's thing. So in a given city, you could find up to 20 ball courts. And some courts were small, and those were the ones that were used for more casual play. And others were really big with beautiful stone reliefs, lavish ball courts. And these ones were used for a ritual game, either in war or to celebrate some sort of cosmological occurrence. And oftentimes, these bigger games usually ended in a beheading. And I want to give you guys an important note that sacrifice was an important part of Mesoamerican culture to literally feed the gods the blood of their people. And it was said like the more blood, the merrier. And why specifically it was a beheading is because when you cut off the head of a person, like there is like spouts of blood, like literally a fountain of blood to dedicate to these gods. And it was also important to give as much blood as possible to the gods because that means that the more blood that there was, the more that the gods would create and hold in their favor. So, as I had said, so with the ball game, there is a clear association when it comes to beheading. And there was a big connection between agriculture tied to the Maya creation myth story of the maize god and the way he dies in the underworld and is revived again. And beheading is has strong connotations as far as when you harvest the maize, like when you harvest the corn, you are cutting the head off as you would a person. And the main ritual ball courts were placed in a city's ceremonial center to show the importance of the game. And as I said, like sometimes this game was played with war or even instead of going to war. And this is a look at their ball court. It's eye shaped, which I think is really neat. The next thing that we'll take a look at is Teotihuacan, um, which is the name derived from the Aztec language that means place of divinity. This is the largest city of the Americas, and it attracted people of a variety of ethnicities. And 100,000 people inhabited Teotihuacan at the height of its city's success, providing extensive work opportunities. So, farming, obsidian, wall painting, and manufacturing sculptures were some of the main features of the cities that brought in people from all over. The ceremonial center was mapped out to honor the significance of the calendar and to respond to the landscape. For example, the Pyramid of the Moon replicates Cerro Gordo, which is an extinct volcano, and it frames the pyramid in a way that shows the relationship between architecture and nature. So you can see that this temple is replicated with the volcano, the extinct volcano, in the background. The city center is known as the Avenue of the Dead that stretches all the way down from the center, from the Temple of the Moon, all the way down to the ceremonial center. One of the most notable architectural styles from this time is called talud tablero, and many of the pyramids were created over caves. And I'll show you an example of talud tablero. So if you can see sort of here, we have a slanted pathway here with a flat upbringing here. And this is a better example of what talud tablero looks like. So we have that slanted angle here, 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 and here. And then we have the tablero. Now, this is the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, and it is at the most southern end of uh, Teotihuacan, which is called Ciudadela. which translates into fortified city. And it's sort of like a sunken plaza surrounded by temples and platforms. And this houses the city's most important religious and political centers. And it houses up to 60,000 people at once. So, as I said, at Teotihuacan's height, it held about 100,000 people. So, if you can imagine, almost everybody was expected and came to these rituals and ceremonies. Its prominent space is the Temple of Feathered Serpents, and the feathers around the serpent's head represents the petals of flowering crops. Uh, he brings the harvest as well as rays of light and associate him with the sun. The curling eyebrow represents duality. Let me click on another image here for you. Um, The curling eyebrow represents duality, and it's a double spiral, as you can see. Um, and the infinity and swirling of the cosmos. The crocodile in Mesoamerican mythology represents Earth. The world was visualized as a large crocodile floating in a lake covered with water lilies. The crocodile was the representation of the god Teal'c. So, as I had said before, a lot of the pyramids were created over caves, and it was believed that when a person dies, their spirit enters the underworld through a cave. And so, if the pyramids were to represent like the overworld, like the earth, the earthly possession of being, then it is assumed that the caves underneath were used for ritual and as a passageway for the spirits to reach the other side of the realm. Now, in the tunnel below the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, they found several different things. They found skin, uh, like human skin, actually, which I would assume to be from ritual and torture. They found beautiful necklaces. They found beetle wings. They found jaguar bones. They found balls of amber, rings, and figurines. They found woven straw mats, probably reserved for the elites to sit on, and rubber balls, as I had referenced before, to play the ancient ball game. They also found ceramic pots and animal bones and birds. And all of these items were most likely used for ritual to give to gods. So this is a map of the Maya trade system. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the 260-day and the 360-day calendars that the Olmecs created. Now, this calendar was created during the late formative, which was between 400 BC and 100 BC. And to remind you, like, this was created during the downfall of the Olmec society, but still, they were able to create something so incredible, even at a time when their culture was diminishing. So the 260-day calendar was for sacred occurrences, and the 365-day calendar was for agricultural occurrences. And they were used simultaneously. And in the image on the bottom, you can see the way that they rotated the inside of the Tzolk'in, which is the 260-day calendar, around the 365-day calendar called the Hab. And yeah. So both As I had said, both the 260-day and 365-day calendars were used simultaneously. The 260-day calendar is the oldest and most important calendar system, and it is guessed to be used as early as 600 BCE, and it is still actually used today in Guatemala for rituals of the gods. There are several theories as far as why the 260-day calendar was 260 days. And the first theory affirms that the solar zenith, which is when the sun passes directly overhead at noon, happens every 260 days. And although this theory is applicable to the Olmecs, especially with their connection to nature and the sun, it is more unlikely because this occurrence is not observable from where the Olmecs were located in South America. The more viable hypothesis for this breakdown of the 260-day cycle is that it relates to the cycle of gestation, which is a cycle between a woman's first missed period and the birth of her child. In Olmec society, it is said that a child was named after the specific day of their birth. The 260-day calendar is broken up into 20-day names and 13-day numbers. Each 20-day cycle was associated with certain shortcomings or gifts, and in special circumstances, a child was named on a different day to sort of prevent that from happening. So these are the symbols of the 20-day cycle and the 18 months of the 360-day calendar. So the 365-day calendar logically relates to the true timeline of the solar year. It is comprised of 18 months of 20 days and 5 nameless days at the end of the year. I think it's a little lazy that they couldn't name those extra 5 days, but that's just me. So to give you an idea of how these calendars work together, it literally takes 52 years of 365 days for a given day to recur. And they celebrated it with what they call a new fire ceremony. So think of how we celebrate the turning of a new century. Those 5 nameless days were seen to be as a very dangerous time, and they had potential for the gods to end existence. So in order to appease the gods, all pots had to be smashed, pregnant women were mandated to stay inside, and the fires of the ceremony the previous day before needed to be put out. At midnight, before the first day of the new year, a sacrificial victim was chosen and their heart was ripped out and their chest was lit on fire. And the fire inside of this chest assured the light of the new day and the new year to come. Now, I just want to show you the Aztec sunstones. This is out of our class period, as I had said earlier, but I just want to show it to you in relation of the 260-day and 365-day calendar. They look very similar, and the Aztecs did a really beautiful job at honoring multiple cultures and maintaining the sovereignty of the cultures that came before them. So next, what we're going to talk about is bloodletting rituals. So bloodletting, blood, gore, sacrifice was an imperative part of Mesoamerican culture. And this was because literally to shed the blood of the people, to honor the gods, showed the gods that you were there in support of them, and therefore they ruled things and your existence in your favor. So the more blood, the merrier. So a ruler's power was reinforced through prayers and sacrifice. And these limestone structures depict the shield jaguar and his life, Lady Sock, in a number of rituals. And how we know that it is the shield jaguar and Lady Jacques, is because the inscriptions on these say their names. In the first image, Lady Jacques is undergoing a bloodletting ritual of piercing her tongue with a rope studded thorns. So basically, she is like on demand anytime when they need bloodletting. Like, she is there to pierce her tongue with these thorns over and over and over again. And why they are doing this ritual is to ensure the healthy and safe birth of Shield Jaguar's son by another woman. In the next image, we can see a snake rising from a burning bowl of blood-soaked paper. And it was said that the bloodletting rituals, many of them, resulted in a psychedelic like experience, and were said that they increase the psychedelic experience by fasting and taking actual drugs along to do the rituals. So chocolate was a very important part of Mesoamerican culture. I mean, I love chocolate just as is, but I love chocolate even more after learning more about the way that it impacted and was used in this culture. So the main source of cacao came from the Mayan mountains near the Shabala caves. And actually, even Hershey chocolate sourced their cacao beans from there as well. And it is still a place that is rich in cacao pods. So chocolate has always been associated with agriculture and fertility, and it was especially used in death and ritual ceremonies. This was because the Mayans believed that when a person dies, they go literally through hell to get to the underworld. So they are battling so many deities and gods in the underworld. And in order to have energy to win these fights, they needed the energy of chocolate. This is why even today we still find remains from Mayan culture of people buried with cocoa pods and with chalices that have remains of the chemicals of cacao. Because of this, cacao was looked at in such high regards and was often traded and treated higher than gold. And you could get anything with cacao. So you could get gold and jaguar skin, rabbit fur. Even people bought prostitutes and wives with it. And I will say one of the really incredible things is that the harvesting of cacao is very similar to what it was in traditional Mesoamerican culture. A lot of it is still a hand created process. We just have better technology now to roast the beans and the seeds, but a lot of it is like hand taking out the cacao seeds from the shells itself. So, Day of the Dead is a 2-day celebration that is around the time of Halloween. And it was derived from an Aztec celebration of the cocoa god. Um, and it has influences from Catholicism. And it is believed that on these 2 days, the passageway of the spirit realm to the earth realm is opened and the deceased loved ones come back to visit their families. Everyone in Mexico and South America create lavish altars, as seen here. Um, uh, and these altars are necessary to show the loved ones that their families still care and love them. Oftentimes, beautiful pathways of chrysanthemum petals um, follow into the house to help guide the spirit into the house as well. And following the ritualistic nature of of cocoa pods, of cacao, of chocolate, cocoa is also put on these altars as well. We'll talk more about Day of the Dead in class, but this is pretty much all we have for today. I hope you guys liked today's class, and I will see you on Thursday. Bye!